Here we go. All right, welcome everybody to the next episode of the Short Fiction Side Hustle, number 21. Rolling along here as we continue our exploration of Stephen R. Donaldson's short fiction collections. And this is more recent collection of stories that he put out, published back in 2015, and then also subsequently published separately. These two
Interesting.
novellas. It was published in the uh, collection called The King's Justice, and then it was published in two separate novellas. One, The King's Justice, and the other, The Augur's Gambit.
Lovely.
Yes. And so, of course, I have with me my good friend Chris here, and we will tackle all the duties of talking about this story today.
Hmm.
And yeah, so this is the collection cover that I think that was originally published in 2015, and the single covers is the one that's in between us here. That's the cover for the single King's Justice story. And then, Chris, you have a reprinted
Yeah, this
cover.
this seems to be the UK cover for this. So the date in this is 2017 on the inside.
Yes.
So it has obviously the Augur's Gambit and then the story we're discussing today, which is the King's Justice.
All right. So that's cool. A little publishing history. And yeah, I couldn't find my copy of the collected version. Like it's over at my brother's house somewhere, but but I got it as soon as it came out way back in 2015 and read it back then, and I was intrigued by Donaldson's ability to create a brand new world out of nothing in just a short period of time and have something that's pretty fully well realized um, as you go through it. So, Chris, what were your high level thoughts here on the King's Justice?
Well, it's pretty much as you say. When I was reading through it, and even if you get the startup and straight through to the end, it just shows you how fine a line there is between novella length and full length book. Because to me, there was enough in this story for this to be a full novel, if that made sense. You could have expanded out a couple more locations otherwise, but it felt very fully realized, the whole thing. In fact, I think the story is actually one of my favorites of Donaldson's that we've read so far. I think because of the kind of the breadth that the story goes to and the little bit of mystery we have at the start that then kind of gets unraveled. And then just generally, I think the entire story, because of the amount of time and space that he got to make it, it's just drifting in atmosphere. I think
Mhm.
the whole story is like the very much a feeling of like our main character Black has his own atmosphere around him. You know, his whole body is a character in itself, which I
Yeah,
think is really cool to take forward. But then even the small hamlet village, etc., that we come inhabit, and the people that are in there and the interpersonalities, that was very well fleshed out as well. So, but I would like to know at what point, or if Donaldson ever flirted with the idea of this should just be a full 400, 500 page novel at that stage, because I do think there is enough left unsaid or enough mystery within the story that you could have definitely branched out a little bit, stuck a bit before it, stuck a bit at the end of it, and really get something even meatier out of it, because I did enjoy it that much.
yeah, cool. Yeah, that's excellent. It is funny because if I remember the first time I read this, um, I got this and I was like, oh wow. And I'm reading through it. I'm like, wow, this is a whole world here. And
Yeah.
I was always looking at things in gaming terms back then, role playing games. I'm like, I could make this, I could fit this into my Dungeons and Dragons
Yeah.
campaign really easily. Just the way he described how the magic works in here, and and how especially with Blackwell, he's this what do you call it, uh he's
King's
made
Justice.
he's
Oh
made
yes, he's a made man. It's Shaper.
a
Shaper,
shape,
wasn't
he's
that? Shaper.
shaped, that's what it is, he is
Yeah.
shaped. He's
Yeah.
not a shaper, but he is
Yeah,
shaped.
that's right.
And he and I found that fascinating with the tattoos and or even more than that, it was like actual metal embedded under his skin and stuff, and that was like wow. So that was like prime role playing game stuff right there, which really took me by surprise because Donaldson really in his previous writings had really aired on the soft magic type of
Hmm.
thing where it's more imaginary and will and in your head and what have you, and this one kind of veered towards there's some rules here,
Yeah.
there's a template, and there's things that people have to follow in order to bring about the magic that's in here, and I
Hmm.
found that just once again showing off Donaldson's versatility and what he can do on the page.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I like the idea that you kind of say there is kind of a more, rather than the magic being conjured from within, it's tied to tactile and physical things within the world, like these glyphs, and then, as you say, the metal. I actually think, given how the story progresses, I think the metal and the metallurgy of it seems to be the key facet of it. You know, the glyphs kind of support the metal, and
Mm.
the conjuring of the metal. Like, I absolutely loved the fact that he had a rune or a glyph for conjuring his longsword. You know, basically the longsword was not there until he touched it, and then it manifested as a metal. And he obviously has metal inlaid in his hands, etc., as well. And 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 I also like the fact that a lot of that was obscured at the start.
Mhm.
I think at the very start of the story, I mean, the whole story starts with, "Oh, are you the king's justice?" Because we call for the king's justice, and he never reveals. And I think for a good half of the story, you're not sure whether he is anything to do with the king, or he is the king's justice, or whether he's just a passer through, because he's trying not to bring attention to himself in a lot of ways. There's a lot of Jedi mind tricks. You know,
Yeah, right.
these are not the droid you're looking for, kind of thing. Going along in that level, and it seems to fit as the story kind of progresses in with this kind of idea of shaping, or people that are shaped at that stage, and nature of people that have been changed by process, rather than necessarily born as the chosen one or anything like that.
Right.
This is just sort of what is in this world. He was not born like this. He was shaped into this kind of instrument of justice, if you want, or instrument of retribution, or whatever you want to say. So I really loved, and that all adds to the atmosphere of the story. You know, the fact that is a very kind of, it's kind of world where, it doesn't have magic just by its very nature. It has magic because of choice.
Yeah, yeah, choice and design and the yeah, and it's still some of it's still fuzzy enough that you still wonder
Mhm.
where some of it comes because you understand that he's a shaped, you know, arbiter of the
Mhm.
king's will, but you're not quite 100% sure how the king works. You know, that's left in the fogs, kind of speak. Uh, and the and then he goes into the like the what they worship, like this was it dark and light,
Yes, yes. Well,
and
the four strands, and then fire and
then
wind, was it?
air
Air and
and fire, yeah.
fire. Yeah.
And how just the explanations of those and how they're different from each other,
Mhm.
and what you know the mystery behind, because he believes that air and fire cannot be controlled at all,
Yes, yes,
cannot be
that's right.
shaped by a shaper. Of course, he learns quite differently as the story goes on, which I thought was pretty damn cool. That
Hmm.
when when we learn of that other guy's gift that he got for joining in with this shaper there, um, that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Sort of linking it to other fantasy stories as well. I think it also uses the idea from Wheel of Time of dark friends. I think within this small village, that there are good people and there are people that are susceptible to evil deeds within.
Yeah. Right.
I don't think it's kind of just seen him Wheel of Time, but I think it very reminiscent of that kind of idea that when he was searching through and quizzing people, and he's walking around, and he kind of senses where evil lurks and comes from. He doesn't know, but he knows when he gets close to it what it feels like. And I really love that kind of sense of, again, very Wheel of Timey, the dagger, Shadar, Logoth, etc., and Wheel of Time, that you can
Right.
sense evil when you're in the presence of it. And I suppose that makes sense even within the context of this world, where people are shaped by materials and things that are within it, that you would have that sort of sense to it. And then also we have this main character, he's called Black, and he's an instrument of the king. And I think in an awful lot of other fantasy stories, these nameless people are powerful beings that serve the king.
Mm.
Whereas as the story evolves, like you kind of said about the king is this nameless presence, or faceless, sorry, presence, that actually, as the story evolves, we find it is the person with the ultimate power. Like, he brought peace and balance to the land because of his nature of his power, and actually he is just an instrument, and he has been shaped into a kind of servant of the king and his will, and that somehow his soul is tied to his service in some way. And again, all of that was like, right, okay, there's a very rich playground with which to play in there for
Mm.
Donaldson, which again brings me back to the thing, like, man, this should have been at least one book, if not three or four. It is a world that I'm fascinated by.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's very interesting. Because what was the I just had a thought. Uh, oh yeah, the I you mentioned the how he can sense evil and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I love how it's through the senses, how he can smell it, and he's like following a trail like a bloodhound almost. And I because so many good writers, they use the senses, they use the sense of smell, they use hearing, they use other things besides just what the character's seeing, and that's always a good sign when you want to get good description and stuff like that. But I think Donaldson did it a little differently with this, the way he could smell uh, foul. He could smell murder. He could smell, the wrongness in certain areas, and I thought that was just really brilliant how he did that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then you have the bit that he can smell, and then you have this the characters within are a combination of people that are good people, they're bad people, but then you also have the incompetent, or the kind of the two fathers, so to speak. They have different levels. They're sort of leaders within the community of some sort, where one is sort of chancing his arm a little bit, and he's just incompetent and sort of doesn't need to know what's going on. So there's this kind of othering of, like, people that are good and bad, and then people that are just capable and incapable, and not because somebody's incapable doesn't make them bad. And I think that question is sort of asked in the middle of the story about whether these two priests, fathers, one of them is a wrong one, or is a bad one, but it just turns out that they are, maybe one's more capable than the other one. I think more, and sort of play their part within the society, and
Mhm.
all of those things are explored. And then we also have the aspect of the child who can't help but want to help, etc.
Yeah,
as well, which I'm sure we'll come to as well. But really, the fate of two children is an awful lot about what the story is as well.
yeah, right. Yeah, indeed it is, and the that's part of the mystery that we're being introduced to as we move along.
Hmm.
You think it's just a murder mystery at first, but then of course it
Sure.
turns into a far more um, involved, ritualistic, uh, deep evil, really,
Yeah.
that he finally roots out and sniffs out, and and is able to follow up and come to uh, a fairly typical standoff at the end. You had the final battle. I mean,
Yes,
that
absolutely.
that is that he didn't like Donaldson didn't subvert anything with that. That was like a classic fantasy final battle that took place at the end. But the way he got there, I think, was really fascinating. And like you said, introducing these characters along the way. Um, the seeress, the girl
Hmm.
who, and I love the fact that it wasn't that he didn't want to involve her because of her age, because the what using that could do to her at such a young
Hmm.
age, and and I like just a little hints that she could become something more in the future, which, like you said, could have been part of a bigger novel or series or whatever. But the
Yeah.
yeah, so lots of little stuff like that, just like you said, gave it so much mood and atmosphere, and had a good time with it, really.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the idea of this girl and the way that he recognizes her kind of says that she also isn't unique within this world. Like he was able to recognize it,
Yeah.
and the bit that I really liked about her, and that again was expanded upon in the end, is that she could sense the holes in him. And when we
Yes.
thought, yeah, at the start of it, you kind of think, oh, the holes in him, it's kind of the bits that are missing. So the loss that he suffered, the grief that he suffered, those kind of things. But it actually turns out that he's had part of his skin kind of dug out and metal inserted in as well. So it had a sort of double meaning in terms of what was going on, and that she could sense that at such a young age and other people couldn't. I think there is something about through the eyes of innocent children that comes out in the story as well. You know that we can't hide ourselves, our true selves, from young kids or animals, even as often
Yeah.
as
Right.
explored in fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. And so it's just interesting because, like, right off the bat, the very first paragraph, we're told Black has a purpose. This guy has a purpose, and his purpose is clear. So you go in knowing that this guy knows what he's doing, but we don't know what he's doing yet. So there's that mystery, right there, and we're told right away that he was shaped, and um, and he's not afraid of nightmares and stuff like that, right? And we're told that he distrust religion and worship, and it says unanswered prayers breed dissatisfaction. Um, and that's very interesting, considering that he's by the end of the story he's calling upon his king, basically,
Mhm.
and he's trusting in what his king did to him in order to get out of his situation, and the people he's going against are basically going against this king, which can be considered a worship figure in one sense. And you
Mm.
contrast that with him running into the two priests of the two different religions there, the enduring dark and the bright light, or whatever it was, and and how it would have been really easy, I think, for Donaldson to turn those two characters into buffoons in
Yeah.
just false, religions and false people. But I like what he did with them because he actually gave them some character and he gave them need in that community, even though Black didn't agree with what they were doing. They brought some comfort to their parishioners, and they were wise to that, especially the enduring dark guy. He was very wise to what his position was and what he was doing, and it wasn't just this caricature.
Yeah.
He was a fully realized character who understood where he stood, where he was within the community, and gave his best to serve the people that are there in his way. And the same thing with the other guy too, even though he did it in a different way. And they each recognized each other's faults, and they were friends. And I thought that was pretty clever and brilliant.
Well, it was, and again, we've just talked about this because we've been just finished reading Speak of the Dead. But this kind of we have an unbeliever in Black, but what he is doing is very similar to the purpose of religion, kind of bringing people together. You know, when he speaks about John meeting up with Rose's mother, can't remember her name, but they should get to know each other. They didn't know each other from beforehand. He is serving the purpose of a religion, or something that binds the community to get together in some way.
Mhm.
And I think if you look at a lot of small settlements or otherwise, their faith and things like that, the idea that they can come together for congregation or for celebration is an awful lot of what binds kind of households, communities together in a kind of central place. And he has started to do that himself in his own little weird way for the betterment of those couple of individuals.
Yeah.
And it's almost, again, to make the same point, it's almost like a ministry that he's doing. It's not just rooting out the evil. He was doing more on the side of it to kind of say, there's more to my role here than just killing monsters or being Geralt in The Witcher or something, which is sort of left there. And the other thing, just to add on to your points about the introduction of Black as a character, one of the first things that he says and he speaks about, he admits basically to the reader that it's a lie. Where did you come from? How long did it get you to be here? And he plucks an answer from the air that is inherently a lie. It tells you a couple of things. One, either he didn't know where he came from, or he wants to obscure where he came from, how he can travel, but also that he doesn't always have to be truthful. He's not a puritanical in that way, that he can
Right.
lie or he can bend truth for the purposes of what he's trying to do, which I think is really interesting as an introduction to the character, because you're not really sure whether to trust him at the start. Again, he's this unknown stranger
Yeah.
at the start. You're not sure if he's there for good or for evil, and given the name Black, I mean, Donaldson's done this before in terms of, wasn't it in the first collection, about the light and dark, that he had a tale about in that story uh, of locking away in the tower. I remember. Anyway, so he plays with this idea that dark is bad, light is light. Johnny obviously did it in Wars Light and Shadow as well. But this idea that light and dark are just necessary kind of opposites of each other, and that
Right.
they are forces within the world rather than necessarily one being good, one being bad, which he also reinforced with um the priesthood, etc. as well. That they are parts of that, and sort of challenging preconceptions that people may have about those going in.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Challenging preconceptions. That's good. The and You make up a good point about not really being able to trust him as as a character, and
Hmm.
from the reader's point of view, because he's coming in and he he's making people just accept what they hear from him, like you said,
That's
the
right.
Jedi mind trick thing. And and also you got to say what's up. Like, one minute his horse is looks like a nag, and the next
That's right.
it's a charging steed. And you know and so you got to wonder about, like you have all these doubts about what this guy is and who he's doing, what he's doing, because um he's fooling people a lot. And you want to assume that this guy is the main character, so he's going to be the hero, whatever. But
Hmm.
the little subtle things that you know the villagers would be um, very upset that somebody would come in, disrupt their lives, because he scents an obscene murder. He smells an obscene murder, and at one point, he was attacked by some of these villagers, some of the more
Absolutely.
belligerent ones. um, and the other guy who lost his son
Hmm.
wasn't happy to see him at all. Didn't like the fact that all this stuff was being brought out, and he kind of forced that out of him with his Jedi mind trick powers. So, not a pleasant chap to be around.
Yeah. Yeah. Much like Ender in Speaker for the Dead. Like, I have to say the parallels there are quite stark, I think, in a lot of ways. The other thing that it does as well, it sort of reminds you that he's not necessarily a good guy. He is a dispenser of justice who is
Hmm.
there to keep balance within the world. So he doesn't necessarily always have to do the right thing. And it means at the end, when his life is under threat, I I don't think you're too well. Certainly, I wasn't, and you can speak to your own experience as well. If he had to die, I wasn't going to be upset. It wasn't like another central character where you're like, God, I hope the good guy wins, and he lives and the other guy dies. In this case, it was very much a case of, and he, a character, was quite willing to forgo his own life and his existence to
Right.
dispense the justice that was needed. So actually, when he originally survived and woke up in the bed afterwards, I was like, oh no, you cheapened that. But we got another layer revealed because of it at the end with the healing
Yes.
that he received, and then the king's justice actually coming out and saving the girl, which I think is a double spin on that the name of the story essentially.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I love because we get those little hints along the way, where she comes in, she sees the holes in his soul, and he gives us that little, he gives us the information about seers and their place in society and stuff like that, um, and I think we would have had questions if the girl didn't come into play at some point.
Yes, that's
We
true.
would have been like, "What's up with the girl? How come she?" So but the way he did it, where, like you said, you're right. I don't think it would have like if he would have died, and if he died in a good cause, giving
Yeah,
himself to stop this fire elemental creature from ravaging the whole place, and he died because of that, and it stopped it. I think that would have been satisfying in and of itself.
absolutely. Yeah,
And then, but then having the resolution of the stuff that was hinted at earlier, I think, yeah, you're right, made it very satisfying indeed.
yeah, and also from the young girl's point of view, I mean, her decision to heal him felt that it wasn't much of a choice. She was compelled to do it. She
Mm.
couldn't help herself from doing it. So again, this idea that he was choosing certain things to happen, whereas the young girl couldn't. I mean, she was willing to give up her life freely from compulsion because she had the gift and could do it. Speaking to the divine nature, I think of good. That kind of perfect selfless act that you will sort of sacrifice yourself for somebody else, but that actually the devastation when he comes around and people are crying. I was certainly a bit confused to basically say, "You're crying over this guy, this kind of thing." And then when it revealed that you seen the girl slumped in the mother's arms,
Yeah,
there's a tragedy to that, and there's a pathos to that that really hits Black as well as the reader. You know what I mean? Because Black's like, "Oh no, 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 no. This needs to be fixed. This is not how things are supposed to be.
yeah,
People can't be saving me because I am just a tool at this stage. I'm replaceable, and this young girl is not." Which I thought again create another layer of power in the storytelling.
yes, exactly, yeah, yeah, and yeah. So that's very cool. What I also like was that Black was also wrong about something. He was firmly in the belief that air and fire were too diffuse to offer any kind of power to a
Yeah,
shaper, and that shaper that was the bad guy proved him wrong. He did it. He pulled off the ritual, and he made a guy of fire. And I thought that was pretty cool. That our guy, who we have no reason to not believe, other than he's shady. He seems shady, and he seems to control people a little bit, but he seemed very knowledgeable and factual,
hmm
but he was actually wrong. and and I found that pretty cool. And it was interesting that that was a real threat, because he had mentioned that the king was um, always on the lookout to balance the powers,
yeah,
the light and the dark and stuff like that. And that was his main focus of being a king, was that he had the power to do that. And he seemed to hint that the king was a fairly busy guy doing that all the time.
yeah,
Uh, and so this fire ability, this shaper being able to do this ritual and put this new element into play, was something that would really have far-reaching implications.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I think to your point earlier, if this was a series, probably would have expanded and gone in wild places. But
Absolutely. This idea that Black is just a tool, that he doesn't know everything, and that actually the person that seems to know the most is the king, who, as we realize through the story, is omniscient. If the reason that Black can't be killed is because the king would know about that, at that
right,
stage, and create another one at that. And be there immediately to stop it happening. If at any stage there wouldn't have been any travel time, there wouldn't have been anything that would need to happen, he would have stopped the process happening in its own right. So they needed Black's powers and glyphs and metal from his body, but they couldn't kill him. And again, there was
yeah,
uh, a lot of kind of trust in the reader that they be able to make up their own mind and make sense of all of that. I
yeah,
think this is a short story that is best appreciated by people that have read a lot in the genre, if that makes sense. It sort of uses a lot of those tropes and a lot of those things to say, that's to make people think it's this type of story, it's this type of world, it's this type of characters, and sort of play with that a little bit and kind of say, well, it is, but it's also maybe not quite what you think it is as well at the same time. And then the use of the fire, the hearts and the livers, ultimately to chuck them all down into the canyon and create this monstrosity at the end that's harvested from all of these people, young kids, soldiers, a mixture of all types, and using basically the evilness that lay within one man.
mhm.
It wasn't that the isn't it Sot was his name, which I thought
That was the shaper saw it.
the
Yeah,
shape. Yeah, yes, him, which I
yeah,
thought was I thought was a nice throwback to. It just made me think, because he was the person that obviously Black was looking for, so he was called Sot. And
yeah.
it's a bit like Cozy Saramago's dog being called Found.
Found. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. The very on the nose kind of names for people, but you kind of get the sense of this almost old Gollum like man, being that character in himself. But he didn't create the monster out of himself. He used his shaping skills to change an ordinary man into a monster, but there had to be a bit of a monster within first,
right.
for to be able to take root. Which, again, very fantasy trope in a lot of ways, but very very satisfyingly done.
Yeah, yeah. Very good. Yeah, uh, yeah. Another hint he gave us early on um, was the fact that Black, when he arrives in this village, he's asking them, "Aren't you guys worried about bandits and stuff like that?" Nope, we're not worried. Don't have a problem. And that tells you right there. Wait a minute. Why? Why are they not worried about it? There's something about him asking that question. There's a
Mhm.
reason for him asking that question, and there's a reason for the villagers acting the way they did towards that question. And it was so that like just piqued your interest a little more. The reason for the absence of a walls in the village or guards or what have you. And of course we find out it's because this guy sought has been taking all their livers and hearts and lungs and whatever.
Yeah. But isn't it interesting that there were signs to the villagers that their village wasn't in balance? Because in a normal way of being, they would be defending themselves. They would have bandits,
Right.
they would have all of that kind of stuff. But as often is the case with humanity, people don't want to jinx a good thing. So if things are going, or we're in a prosperous period, all the other ills of society get washed away. People don't bring
Mhm.
them up because things are good,
Yeah.
and you don't want to jinx it and do that kind of stuff. And yet, when things are going badly, they blame everything around them, as being the ills. So I think they can, like you say, there were small signs there, um, earlier on in the book, that we shouldn't really have taken Black to come along and say, for people to be noticing and looking at each other. And I think especially for the two priests, they probably should have seen something about that as well.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, he kind of acts as the hammer of obviousness who walks into.
Yep.
But yeah, so very very interesting, very clever story.
Yeah.
Um, I was glad to read again, and this one, this one I only read 10 years ago. So
Oh,
um, uh, I knew I liked it, and I knew I was fascinated with the world that
mhm.
Donaldson created, just in these small amount of pages. Um, and but I didn't remember a lot of the details, especially of the way that he set up the magics in this particular story. So now I'm glad I got to revisit that and experience it again, because it's worth experiencing for those of you out there who actually would have listened to this without ever reading it. But anyway,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just another great example of Donaldson's power of storytelling. Like he has done it in very short stories. He's done it in medium-sized stories. He's done it in longer stories. He's done it in series. And he's a very skilled writer at weaving multiple themes into a story that is essentially just on the surface of it. You could read it as a good versus bad kind of tale. Battling
yeah,
the ultimate evil
yep.
in some ways, but I think it's much more complex than that as you sort of think about it and think through it.
Yeah, I mean, you could tout this as a standard fantasy trope story, and say, hey, yeah, this is something that if you like fantasy, you'll like this, you know, and but then you can, like we have done here for over 30 minutes, look into it deeper and see a lot of things in there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely, great author. Another
yeah,
example of him uh, having real skill in his craft.
yes, absolutely. Um, so I think we covered everything, unless you got anything else that to bring
No,
up.
I think we've covered pretty much every corner of that book from start to finish.
Yeah. So next episode's story is actually a bit longer. This one,
Mm,
in this standalone version of it, the Augur's Gambit, it's actually 180 pages.
yep,
So get ready, give yourself some time. This is might not be a two sitting story, uh,
absolutely.
but this will be up next, the Augur's Gambit, and then who knows what, because we've run out of Donaldson short fiction. So,
Can I
uh,
get your thinking cap on? Unless
which,
Mr.
yeah,
Donaldson can produce a surprise. I don't
maybe,
know.
which, makes me sad, but also very happy that we've done them all. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
What an achievement. So join us next time for that. And like I always say, well, go to Chris's channel, check out his stuff. And like I always say, be good to each other, and thank you.